So I was going to show you just a little bit of the progress that, or how I go about doing some of this stuff. Basically what I'm doing here is I'm looking at the right lower lobe of the lung, and right now the green parts are what I'm putting in here, and I'm just roughly approximating the surface in 3D coat. And so I've kind of shown this before on some other videos, but basically all I do is I just come in here and I start um, tracing around a little bit, and I think what I'd like to do is split this one right there, if it'll let me. We'll see if it lets me kind of do that or not. I don't know if it will. Um, but anyway, along these lines here, which when I go around the edges, it becomes a little bit more difficult to see where I'm going to end up. Okay, and so now it's going to find another loop. So what we're going to do is we're going to split it from there to there, and so that likes things. And so basically what I'm going to do is just go ahead and continue to create polygons around and fill in this under area here the same way that I was filling in all these other areas with these polygons. And basically what it does is it reduces the amount of polygons underneath. Let's see if I can show the wireframe, which is all that. And so this is what's giving all the detail right now, is all these little polygons. And they are kind of reduced a little bit, but I need to reduce them down even more so that the computer handles it just a little bit better. And so how we do that is just continue along like this around the rest of the model, and then we'll fill it in, and then we'll show you what we end up coming up with. And it'll be much more reduced and easier to handle. And then what I'll do is I'll bake what they call baking high poly model information onto this low poly mesh that I'm making here. So low polygons, because the amount of polygons or shapes that I'm putting in here is much lower. Oops. Than the base. And we end up with problems like this sometimes on high density models, because there are actually some structures underneath this stuff. When they segmented this is actual from CT scan data. So when they actually segmented some of this crap, there's some other stuff that lies underneath that really kind of messes with your construction process here. But this takes a few minutes and a little bit of planning ahead, and of course there is a little bit of forethought of polygon flow, because basically this is going to be subdivided. This small little part is going to be subdivided, and that went through the mesh. So and maybe subdivided again here even more to give you a little bit more smoother detail, but ultimately this stuff is going to be mapped together. And there's actually a square shape here. Yeah. So I'll work on this just a little bit, and we'll come back to this when we get to the second part of the stage. And for right now, shield we might have. When we get to these parts, it just really kind of ticks me off. Yeah, more than two vertices are sharing the same spot. So I will fix that and then we'll come back here in a second. Okay, so we have it done here. This is the right lower lobe of the lung. And so I finished this up, and of course there isn't just all quads, there are some triangles, but we try to make it as good as we can for subdivision surfacing. Basically from here, we're going to take this and we're going to export this out, and we're going to take it into Blender, and then we're going to see if we can't add some smoothing to it, and go from that. So this is the directory that I like to keep it in here. It's going to be the right lower lobe, and we'll call it Retopo. Okay, so add some Blender here. We'll import that, and we'll go to the respiratory, and we'll bring up this. And so you can see there's a lot less geometry around here. So the first thing that we need to do is to smooth this out a little bit. So that's going to be plain and simply just by hitting smooth shading. Now it doesn't look all that great right now. I know it doesn't look all that great right now, but it will. And so we're going to re-export this really quick. And this is the quickest way that I know how to do it, and the most accurate way I know how to do it, because Blender translates out OBJs and interchange formats such as OBJ really well. So I trusted in doing a good job. And so from there, what we're going to do is we're just going to remind us to do something to make it new. And so then we go into our next one. It's called Substance Painter, and this is going to show you how much I cheat it. So we will start a new project, and I'll change this to OpenGL. I'll change the map size to 2048. It's a 2K map. And we'll go ahead and open up our right lower lobe Retopo object, and it should look exactly the same as... Oh, sorry. It shouldn't, because we didn't do what we were supposed to do here. So what we're going to do is we're going to UV map this mesh. We have some of our settings in there, and what a UV is this stuff over here. It basically takes this complex shape and then it cuts it up into different areas so that it can flatten it out here. So imagine like your shirt pattern or the pattern for a dress or whatever like that is all cut up on the seams and then it's laid out flat. You just have to sew it together. That's basically what's going on here. So we're going to clear the seams here first, and I like to take long runs that actually go around and fairly flat plane type of stuff, and we'll start marking them out. And I wish they didn't have it as being as green being the default start color, because it makes it really hard to see where your seams are. But right there's a flattened part, and then I'll just go around, oh, I don't know, maybe around here. And this is what makes 3D Coat worth $99 if you want to spend it for that. And even though there could be some distortion around the edges, I don't really care, because that looks fairly clean. We tell it to unwrap. You see that it flattens that stuff out there. Maybe we'll just pack it, see if it packs it a little bit better. Didn't really do anything like that, or didn't do anything super special. I suppose the way it was unwrapped first would have been fine. And then we go ahead and we apply this UV set, because if we don't, then it won't be applied to our model. Now we have to sit up here and export these objects and textures, and then we'll tell it to do it underneath the same name that we had it. And yes, we want to overwrite that. And so now Substance Painter should be fine with this, because now it has a UV map to work with, because it works with UV maps. So we'll go ahead with this. Open this up. And there it is. So it looks like the same old, same old. Okay, fine. And so what we do is we tell it to bake textures, and we're going to tell it to bake it from that high poly texture that we started out with. But what I'm actually going to do first is that, I know I'm kind of going backwards on this stuff. I had an idea of what I was going to do at first, and then it just kind of panned out wrong. I'm going to change this to right lower lobe there, change the data in here to right lower lobe. This will just help us out a little bit better. And I will change this to right lower lobe, so that when it's exported, it'll actually be exported correctly. So we'll export this. Sorry, I should have done this first, but I didn't. Okay, now we'll go back here. We'll do the new. We'll discard this thing. We'll take that stupid file there, open it up. We'll bake the textures. We'll bake it from the high poly. So we're looking for the high res right lower lobe object. So this is the high res right lower lobe object. And we'll let it do that. So right now what it's doing is it's finding all these surface features and stuff like that that's modeled into that high poly mesh, baking it out to little maps that actually end up showing up here, and then overlays it on top. And does a fairly good job. And then I'm just going to do a cheap, a very cheap texturing thing here. We'll go to my shelf. I'm going to go to the Smart Materials, and I'll use what I've been using. I thought it looked like a pretty good texture to use on that anyway. That's fine. Okay, that's fine. We'll export these textures. We're going to export them back over to my body, which is in the respiratory system that we're dealing with here, and we're going to select that folder and we're going to export it. And so now all our textures should be right there, so that's pretty good. Usually I keep some of these things open. Alright, so I know that my UV map is in place here. If I go like this, and let's just do a new image, we can see that they're there and it's unwrapped, and that's the appropriate one that I need to deal with. And since I'm going to deal with RenderMan, we're going to go ahead and go into the node editors here. All this is garbage junk. I don't know why it's all there, but it is. So we're going to put a material output, otherwise we won't be able to see it. We're going to put in Pixar surface. We're going to put in, let's see, we need to get our texture maps in here. So our texture, and then copy that, linearize that. We'll show that Y in a second, and then we have to do a bump map, and we'll call it the normal. So as long as we go over here, then things should be good for RenderMan to get going. So we'll save this first, and we'll call this the right lower lobe Retopo. Because somehow RenderMan doesn't really work too well when you don't save it as a blend all the time. So for the diffuse, what we have is our maps. So we'll go over here and we'll look for the right lower lobe base color. We'll accept that, and we have to linearize that. For some of you out there, the reason why is because there's some linear workflow on RenderMan and many other things, and so your colors, your color maps and everything like that, just so they display correctly, they should be linearized. They should be color corrected. Your black and white maps that you use, normal maps, they can stay linear because it gives you a hell of a lot more information to work with. It gives you a lot more subtle detail. So we'll just plug that into there. Let's give it a little bit of light here. We'll tell the camera to sit right about there, maybe. I don't know. Let's tell it to just lock that a second so I can get a, I don't know, goofy ass angle of it. And yeah. So then we'll start the interactive preview renderer with RenderMan. And so we have our color already coming out there. And so what I do is I add a primary specular to this, and then we will tell it to be about, just because I like that much specularity in that, and I have to go ahead and give it one of these things where it's a roughness map. And you just have to plug one of these outputs here, either the red, green, or blue, into the roughness area here, which drives that. Let's make this smaller, just so it works a little bit faster. So as you can see, it added some specular to it. And then now what we have to do, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and add the subdivision surface to make it more smooth. So we get the smoothing thing, and then the magic will happen with the normal map, because we have all our colors here. And so we will choose our normal map, which is our bumpiness of the object. We accept that, and we put that right into the bump. And then RenderMan doesn't always update right away, but there you have it. With all the bumpiness and stuff. And so to show you just a little bit of the more bumpiness, we'll come back over here, we'll lock the camera to the view so we can bring that around, and so you can actually see that mapped detail is there. And that's just from that one map, the bump map, that actually tells it to be that bumpy. So we went from a high-res mesh, we brought it here, we turned it into this low-res stuff. We then UV mapped it, smoothed it out and stuff like that in Blender, applied all the stuff that we needed to after baking it out of Substance Painter, and then rendering it in RenderMan inside Blender. Well, that's usually how I go about doing these things. And so you can get, as long as you get practiced over and over again, you get faster and faster at doing these things. So right lower lobe, there you go. Got the right middle lobe and the right upper lobe left to do for the right lung, and that'll be about it. So just a quick overview, nothing more, and we'll see you next time after we do some more work.